Welcome to InterPartyConflict, the podcast where we answer your questions so you can have the best tabletop gaming experience possible. My name is Gabe.
My name is Jeff.
And we've got two very special guests with us today, Jesse and Sean from DMs of Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Sean.
And I'm Jesse.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
So I found you guys when I think Justin from Crit Academy was he very often like posts on Twitter like a huge line of all the podcasts he's listening to, and you guys were on there. I think you guys followed us on Twitter, and then I followed you back, and I listened to a couple episodes of your podcast, and I thought sounds like a great show, and so I reached out, and here we are.
Yeah, well, thank you. And so after you reached out, because I am paranoid about random people reaching out to us, so I always look into whatever the thing is. And I actually discovered that you've talked to some friends of ours in the network. We're part of Damien and Sketchy, or Caitlin.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, they're good people.
Yeah, they're good people. We did some Extra Life stuff with them earlier this year, or last year, I guess.
Yeah. Do you want to tell our listeners about your show?
Yeah, Sean, do you want to go?
Sure. It's basically an advice show aimed at newer GMs, but we also tackle stuff for DMs who've been in it for a decade or more. Basically, every episode we have somebody on, and they talk about something usually that they're fairly passionate about. And we've covered a wide range of topics from session zero to all sorts of fun and interesting topics. Some a little bit more lighthearted than others, but at the end of the day, the goal, what we're reaching for, is to try and just give advice to anybody who's a GM in anything that they might be trying to do at their table, to help them out, give them ideas.
Yeah, give them the tools that they need.
Well, awesome.
Yeah, it's also worked out pretty well because we kind of started the show based on the fact that we would often talk to each other about D&D and like running stuff because we didn't happen to play any of each other's games. And we're kind of like extending and recording those conversations with guests and, hoping it proves helpful to people.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like we're in a similar business, I would say.
Yeah.
I think that I've come to realize that a lot of the advice that we give on our show, I end up inadvertently tailoring it mostly towards people running the game rather than people playing the game. I like it to be as universal as possible, but I mean, because I've had so much more experience being a dungeon master than being a player, I think that's just kind of where I'm coming from most of the time.
Yeah.
I think there's a certain amount of truth to the fact that like GMs have to think about how they play a lot of the time.
Sure.
Though like I certainly wouldn't want to imply that players don't, because I'm also a player and I spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm doing, but like it's more necessary for the DM's role to be like overthinking everything.
Sure.
It comes naturally to think way too much about all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, with players, it comes more down to like just like etiquette and behavior. It's like player etiquette is important, and like understanding that the amount of work that goes into being a DM.
Sure.
That's good for a player to know. But yeah, you like as far as like advice for D&D, it's going to be the majority of it is going to be for the DM, just because there's so much extra work involved.
Yeah. I guess Sean and Jesse, why don't you tell me how you guys got into tabletop role playing? I always forget to ask our guests this. I always intend to.
You remembered. The email
Yes.
worked. I got into tabletop in kind of like a long, convoluted way, in that like I was friends with a bunch of people who played in high school, and I would go to their houses and hang out and see their books and leaf through them, but never got to play for like many years until finally someone was like, "Oh hey, we're gonna run this Star Wars game. Do you wanna play in it? We're trying to get new players into it." And so I first played the Fantasy Flight Star Wars game, like the mid-2000s Star Wars D20 game, and then briefly played some 3.5, and then launched into 4th edition when that came out shortly thereafter.
Cool.
For myself, D&D was something that I had a fascination with in high school when I first got introduced to it. I never got around to getting invited to any games, and there were some things I had in the back of my mind that like, oh, that would be a fun thing to do a campaign for, that just kind of sat in my subconscious for years until the 5th edition beginner's box came out, and I'm like, I'm going to buy it and I'm going to wrangle up some people and sit them down at the table and we're going to do this thing. And I ended up running the beginner's box for 2 separate groups at the same time, which was an adventure. And I've been basically I ran a homebrew campaign after that, and I've branched out really quickly into a bunch of other games. I've played Eclipse Phase and the latest Star Wars, and I quickly grew a collection of rule books and various different games that I have yet to play, but that is my resolution for this year, is to get through as many of those things as possible.
Hell yeah.
Cool. Sounds like a worthy endeavor.
That playing for 2 groups at the same time, or that made me think of an idea of like playing the same adventure with 2 different groups, and then like having it end up being like a parallel universe sort of thing, where like you schedule the 2 groups at the same time for like the end of the campaign.
Yeah.
And like everybody's like, wait, why are there so many people here? And you go, oh, you guys have actually been adventuring in a parallel universe or something.
Yeah, that could be cool.
It's just like trying to think of silly ways to like incorporate, if you're running multiple groups, how to
Sure.
have their adventures interact in some way.
I feel like that's a really awesome idea, but for myself, I could only do that if each group had only 3 people, because I think 6 is my max.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do that with like 8 or 10 people.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
And it's like if it's supposed to be parallel, then it's like, well, this group we had to skip a session because so and so got the flu or something.
Sure.
So it wouldn't line up perfectly or anything like that. But I don't know. It's just a little thing that popped in my head when he mentioned running the same adventure for 2 different groups simultaneously.
Yeah.
I've known somebody who's done the parallel groups of adventurers things, either in the same world or in like alternate universes, and it always ends up kind of becoming a mess, because inevitably one group gets way far ahead of the other one.
Yeah.
Right, of course. It always comes down to scheduling issues. Like,
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, do you guys want to go ahead and get into this episode?
Yeah,
Sure.
let's go.
Let's do it.
Cool.
Wait, are we not recording?
Oh, shoot.
No, I'm kidding.
All right. I want the 3 of you to imagine that you are in a dungeon, and you just fought the evil lich or whatever, and the dungeon's starting to fall apart. It's collapsing behind you. And then at the last second, you see that a passage has just opened up, and you remember that you heard that this dungeon used to be the lair of the evil dragon Ashardalon. And so without any other option, you duck down that passage that just opened up. You watch as the ceiling behind you caves in, and you come to rest in this room. And then you realize that your torch, the light, is shimmering off of something in front of you. And you look ahead and you see a pile of gold. You see gems. You see all sorts of treasure. And you realize that you have stumbled into the Dragon's Hoard.
I have to say really quickly, it's really nice being on the other end of a DM doing a little monologue like that.
Okay, cool.
I'm so used to being the one delivering them, and being on the other end is like, oh, I didn't have to put any effort into this. This is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Oh, this is nice.
We haven't really played D&D for a very long time. Like, I run a short little introductory thing at my local library every month. But other than that, and like I do a Roll20 game for us roughly every month when people show up. But I haven't actually run I haven't had a game, like a dedicated game, in a very long time. And we just started an Eberron game a couple weeks ago, or last week.
Yeah.
Like a week and a half ago. And even if I'm the dungeon master, it's so nice to just be running a game again.
Yeah. That's
I love it. Who knew? D&D is fun.
Yeah.
Right? I this last week, or I guess this last week, I got back to running for the first time in like 2 months for both of my campaigns, and I was like, oh, it's such a relief. They're moving forward again. Things are happening.
All right, so today for the Dragon's Hoard, I believe one of the 2 of you had a magic item to bring in. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's mine. It's one of the magic items I built for my very first campaign.
Cool. Why don't you tell us how it works and how you used it, and we'll see what we can talk about.
Okay, so this item is interesting, and part of the reason I wanted to talk about it is that it was Fifth Ed had just come out. I don't even know that we had all the books yet because they didn't release them all at once for some dumb reason.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah. But so my group had historically played 3.5 and 4th Ed, like, because it had started even before I'd joined up. And we all had a big problem with how feats worked initially.
Sure.
Because we just weren't used to them, and we were mad about it because we were, we are nerds that sometimes get mad at things for kind of silly reasons.
Yeah.
So one of the things we had noticed that for fighters, like, if you want to be tanky at all, you have to take Sentinel. Like,
Sure.
You absolutely have to.
Yeah.
So we had a fighter. I didn't want her to feel like she had to take that feat in order to be effective. So I was like, why don't I make a magic item that has the cool things from Sentinel, like the better third of that feat as an ability, and then put a couple of smaller, like, additional things.
Okay.
So she was playing an Eldritch Knight fighter, but she came from, like, a kind of jungle warrior background, so she was very in tune with nature and stuff like that. So I gave her this halberd that was forged out of magical wood, and it did the things that Sentinel did. Great. And as the additional feat, she could use a bonus action once she hit someone with it to get it to, like, kind of grow its roots and grab and grapple the person she was fighting.
Okay.
Cool.
Cool. Yeah.
So it was cool thematically, but I also learned mechanically it was not the best.
To have somebody grappled 10 feet away from you?
No. Actually, that was fine. The problem was, A, it didn't happen a lot. Like, it didn't actually work a lot.
Oh, okay.
Because of how grappling works. But also, B, it took her bonus action, which as a halberd-based fighter with halberd mastery took away from her additional, like, half attack.
Right, right. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like, having to decide what to do with your bonus action if you got too many options.
Yeah. I wonder if it might work better either if you use your bonus action, but it automatically grapples them. You don't have to roll. They are grappled. Either that, or you do still roll, but you don't have to spend an action. It's just whenever you hit someone.
Yeah.
Or it could kind of go with the what was that, polearm expert or something?
Polearm mastery, yeah.
Mastery, yeah, where they have to where you're attacking with the the other end of it. If it hits.
If the second attack hits?
If the second attack hits, then that's like an automatic grapple.
Okay.
There are some monsters that like when they use their bite attack or something like that, they just, like, if the attack hits, they are now grappled and restrained, and that's just part of the attack.
Right.
Like a roper that can, because I didn't read through the description properly, can grapple the entire party before you realize what's going on.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's like the other end of the halberd, because it's the staff part of the halberd, and it's made of the wood. Like, there could be like vines growing out of the back end of it, and so when you hit with that end, that's what's grabbing onto them. So it's just sort of
So it's not every attack; it is just the bonus action attack,
right?
Because at higher levels, you might be making 3 or 4 regular attacks, but you still only get that one
bonus,
like offhand attack.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
And, like, I think that's how I would do it. Or I would make it so it has a certain amount of auto grapples a day.
Sure.
Like,
maybe like a once per short rest or
something like that.
There'll be like little buds or something growing off of it to signify how many times they can still be used, and like at the beginning of every dawn, more buds show up or something.
That's a great descriptor.
I'm thinking of, like, I haven't played Bloodborne, but I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. I've watched a couple of videos.
Yes.
There's a weapon in Bloodborne that you can switch modes.
Actually, all of them switch modes, but
cool.
They're all in very different ways.
I did not know that. But what I was thinking, what came to mind for me was that thinking of it as a plant-based weapon, that you can have it switch modes, where in one mode, it's a halberd, it's it's a big long rod with a pointy thing on the end, and the other mode, it becomes like a vine whip, and that's what grapples.
Oh, sure.
Like the cane, cane to sword whip weapon in Bloodborne.
Yeah. So it's a choice between, do I want to have like the reach of a halberd, or do I want to be able to just grapple somebody and be able to maybe toss them around a little bit?
Sure.
Ooh, I like
Yeah, that could
better,
work.
honestly.
I am all for the idea of trick weapons in D&D,
Yeah.
like weapons that transform from one thing to another.
Especially in 5th edition, they kind of like simplified like your weapon choices in 5th edition. So
which we will be talking about later.
sure.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that could be a great way to do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think this is a really cool weapon, and it definitely could. There's potential there, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Was there any particular like story to it? Was it just found this halberd, or was there like a history to it or anything?
So the thing is, it has been, 5 years almost since 5th edition came out?
Sure.
And I cannot remember the individual session, and I don't know where my notes are.
No
So I'm
problem.
not entirely sure how it came to the party. However, it did become the most, even though it wasn't the greatest, it became the most iconic magical item in the game.
Okay.
And later on, a different DM in our group was running a greatest hits campaign where like other characters that we had previously played were kind of showing up, and like a bunch of items were, and that was one of the most prominent things that showed up, and we spent a lot of time trying to find that character in that game because
That's
we
really
found
cool.
her halberd.
Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I did something sort of similar. There was a game that I ran where it was the Age of Worms campaign, which I've mentioned on our show many times before, but not in a while. And there was it was a published adventure path, and in one of the adventures, the players they find an artifact, and then the story wants them to trade it to a powerful NPC, and in exchange, he'll give them each a magic item that is tailored specifically to them. And when I was running this, I really wanted to go all out with this because I love giving out cool magic items. So we had 3 players, and I came up with an item from each of the players' pasts. So Jeff here, and then our friend Steve, I knew that the 2 of them had played D&D together before all of us met. And so I sort of like in secret asked the other of them, I asked Steve, hey, what was an item that Jeff got a long time ago? And then I found out he had this like emerald sword that his character had. So I found out what it did in the campaign where he got it, kind of reworked that into what would fit in a 3rd edition game.
Made it way less overpowered because when I used to play when I was a lot younger, I was just like, it does like 200 d6 damage or something ridiculous. You know?
Right. And so I gave Jeff an item that his previous character had, and then same with Steve and same with Jay. And I love the idea of giving the players or letting the players interact with like a fan favorite from the past. I love that.
Yeah, it's cool, especially if you have if you're playing with a group of people that you can actually do that with because you've been playing together long enough.
I think to me that's one of the biggest draws for having a long-running campaign setting is that you can have those kind of like characters from previous campaigns can become heroes in myth and folklore, and the weapons that they used to defeat ancient evils are now these powerful artifacts that can show up in modern times.
Sure. Yeah, that's really cool. I sometimes do. I mean, I haven't had a consistent group in a long time, but like I sometimes do that in ways that only I would recognize. In my own head, I'm enjoying that. But I do think that even if the players weren't there for that, it still makes for a lived-in world. If there are all of these heroes and legends and such, it does still work, because then it feels like, oh, the DM isn't like the hero Bob computer screen has the sword of Greenwall, and so if you do have something to pull from, I think it can benefit even if the players weren't there for that. But it is way better when the players were there and they're like, oh my goodness, I know who that is.
Yeah, Bob computer screen.
Yep, the sword of Greenwall.
Sword of Greenwall.
Ooh, let me write that down.
Yeah, write it down. That's
Sword
good.
of Greenwall.
Actually, Sword of Greenwall doesn't sound terrible, if I'm completely honest.
For anybody listening, I'm in a room with green walls, which is why.
And sitting in front of a computer screen.
Sitting in front of a computer screen that's bobbing in a tank of water right now.
I mean, I do have to agree. I think Sword of Greenwall does sound like it's the sword from like some small little town that became famous.
Oh, there you go.
Sure, yeah.
I like to think that the Greenwall kind of hints at the fact that once you have it for a while and are really truly attuned with it, you can summon a wall of vines or something.
That could work too.
Yep.
Summon vines with Sword of Greenwall. Okay.
This is good.
All right. Did this weapon have a name?
No, it just ended up becoming the Halberd of Renai. Renai was the character who wielded it first.
Okay.
Like, I'm thinking back, and I think it might have been, like, essentially made for her, summoned for her by either, like, an ancient druid or a unicorn, because unicorns definitely showed up several times in that game.
Sure.
I can't remember.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, do you guys have anything else to say about this halberd?
No, it's just, I think it was one of those things that I just kind of had an idea for and developed it, and that's one of the great things about being a DM. You can just do that.
Yes, you can. All right, cool. Well, I guess that was the Halberd of Renai, if I had to give it a name. Thank you very much, Jesse, for bringing that in. Jeff, if anybody wanted to submit magic items for us to discuss in the Dragon's Horde, or if they had questions for us, or stories for the funeral pyre, or the retirement village, how would they get those to us?
They could send us an email at interpartyconflict@gmail.com or join us on our Interparty Discord at bit.ly/interpartydiscord.
Yes, you do not have to be a patron or anything. The Discord is open to anybody and everybody. All right, well, before we go any further, we have a giveaway today.
Ooh.
As we have established in the last couple episodes, we're no longer giving away a copy of Chapel on the Cliffs, courtesy of Goblin Stone. That was a great giveaway we were doing for a while. However, we are now moving on to giving away a copy of Crit Academy's Unearthed Tips and Tricks book. That is a book that I helped write. It's a great book. It's full of the player tips, DM tips, character concepts, encounter concepts, magic items, and monster variant. So it's a great book. Not just because I had a part in making it, but also it's because it's a great book.
Right.
It's a great resource. So this is our first giveaway of this book. Who is our first winner today, Jeff?
Our winner today is Carl L.
Winner. Gobble, gobble, gobble. Yes. Congratulations, Carl L. You should be getting that in your email in the next few days. It's our first time, so we're still working this one out. Give it a few days. If you haven't gotten it in about a week, let us know. So let Crit Academy know what you think. Be sure to leave them a review on DM's Guild if you can. So, Jeff, if anybody else wanted to be like Carl here and would like to enter this drawing, how would they do that?
They could send us an email at interpartyconflict@gmail.com with unearthed tips and tricks in the subject line.
Yes, that seems to be how people are sending that in. I do have to show you, Jeff. Somebody sent us... we sort of referenced, we said in the body of the email, you can send whatever you want. Somebody sent us this.
Yeah, it's a picture of a baby tortoise.
A picture of a baby tortoise. So I showed that to my wife even. It's a good quality email right there. So yeah, send us an email with unearthed tips and tricks in the subject line. Anything you want in the body, maybe a picture of a tortoise or a rat or something like that.
Right.
That would be appreciated. And thank you very much to Crit Academy for helping us get this going.
Cool.
And then also, we have a Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/interpartyconflict, we've got a Patreon campaign on there. Patreon is an online platform. You can pledge to donate a certain amount of money per month to the creator of your choice. If you check ours out, we've got a few different tiers. On the lower tiers, we've got outtakes every week, usually every week if we have any outtakes. We've got some fantasy fiction that I've written. I'm currently in the process of making those into audio format so you can listen to them instead of just reading them. We have a monthly bonus podcast, InterPatron-Conflict, where we talk about a variety of topics. We've also got a monthly Roll20 game, which we just did our Roll20 game the other day. I think it went pretty well, and hopefully we can continue this adventure in the coming weeks. So got some cool stuff on there. Check it out, patreon.com/interpartyconflict. Check out the rewards, see if anything appeals to you, and if you want to help keep the show going, keep the lights on, you can get some cool stuff in return. And then Sean and Jesse, if you want to tell our listeners about your show, where they can contact you, where they can find the show to listen to it, anything like that. Anything else you guys want to plug, go ahead.
Well, first off, we're a member of the Cave Goblins Network. They've got a Patreon set up, patreon.com/cavegoblins. You can support our show and a bunch of other really cool ones. You can also get access, if you become a Patreon, to a rotating series of podcasts called Revolver, where a host from the network does a short 6 to 8 mini series that rotates throughout the year. They've done a bunch of cool ones. Right now they're doing Second Banana.
Second Banana is our friends Joe, Wes, and Craig, and they basically take two figures in history, one who is the most well known for something, and they look at the person who is the next most well known for something.
Yeah, and you can find our podcast, DMs Vancouver, pretty much anywhere. I think Apple, Google, Spotify, maybe others. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, most podcatchers.
And also every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, I host a party night kind of dealio on Mixer, mixer.com/cavegoblins. We play party games and have weird, raucous fun.
Yes.
Awesome.
Cool.
And I'm sorry, what day did you say that is?
Thursdays.
Thursdays. Okay. I work Thursdays, unfortunately, but whenever I have a Thursday off, which I will have next Thursday off, I'll have to try to take part in that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And you can, we also have a Discord for the network. Just the Cave Goblins Discord. You can find it at cavegoblins.com. It should be linked right at the top.
Yep.
Awesome.
Cool.
Cool. All right. And then just one more thing I want to tell everybody to go check out the other podcasts on our network. Check out Crit Academy. I mentioned them earlier. They made the Unearthed Tips and Tricks book. On Crit Academy, Justin, Ian, and Brandon make new and reusable content for players and DMs alike. They're a great group of guys, and we actually might be playing a game of D&D with them sometime in the next week.
Cool.
So I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
Also, check out Brute Force and Ignorance. They are an actual play podcast on the network, and D&D Character Lab is not making episodes anymore, but when they did make episodes, and those episodes are still out there, Garen and Dan made characters every week and then debated whose characters were better. So check those out. Also check out DMs of Vancouver. Some great stuff. You guys want to go ahead and get into some questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right. Our first question comes from Gizmo Trunks on Reddit. How do you handle enemy aggro / choosing targets in combat? I don't like the idea of rolling or choosing randomly, but what about assigning values based on actions in combat? So like a threat system.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Have you guys, how do you guys, when you're running a game, how do you decide who an enemy is going to attack?
So I think about a bunch of different things. First of all, am I running something that is functionally mindless? Is it a zombie? Because zombies are just going to go after whoever's closest to them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is it an animal that is smart enough to be vindictive and might go after whoever hit it last? Is it an enemy that might be actually afraid of getting hurt, might try a different target? I try and figure out how the enemy would approach what's happening actively. So it's not quite assigning a value-based system, but it is like values based on actions in combats.
So my answer is functionally the same. I think when it comes to sapient enemies, like you're up against orcs or half orcs or goblins or something that can think and like try to plan ahead about what's going on, especially if they're being directed by, the end boss of the campaign who has a goal. Like maybe the sorcerer in the party has an amulet that the bad guy needs, so they're gonna maybe try and go after the sorcerer to maybe not kill him, but pickpocket him and get that amulet and then just scamper off into the wilderness or whatever. But when it comes to animals and stuff like that, for me it's kind of taking a look at their wisdom and intelligence and figuring like if they've got high wisdom, maybe they'll be able to figure out like if it's an animal like a wyvern or a chimera or something like that, like these more intelligent, maybe a little bit more wise animals, they'll be able to figure out, oh, I need to not focus on the tank of the party. I need to take out that spellcaster in the back. Stuff like that. The one thing that I do try to do, though, is that when I'm controlling animals or, like Jesse said, like mindless creatures like elementals or something like that, what's a little bit more important to me is how they behave after they've taken somebody out. Like an elemental or an animal isn't going to stop once somebody's down, especially if it's maybe a vindictive animal. It might want to make sure that whatever was hurting it isn't going to get back up ever. And that's usually something that I will talk to players about before we even start the campaign, of like, how lethal do you want this to be? Like if there's an animal or something and you're in combat and you're down, how much danger do you guys want to be in if you get knocked out?
That's definitely a good thing to discuss before it becomes an issue.
Right. Yeah. Because that makes sense, like if it's an animal, like a wolf or a bear or something, something that's carnivorous, like if it takes you down, it might start chomping away at you. Like, it's not going to stop and wait for the rest of the party to show up to start eating you.
Sure. As far as like attacking people in combat, I often find myself, I always find myself panicking over this because I'm always like, okay, which one would it attack? Oh my goodness, but are the players going to perceive that as it being smart, or are they going to think that I'm just choosing randomly?
Right.
I tend to stress over it way more than is necessary, and way more than anybody. I'm sure nobody is thinking any of these things that I am certain they are thinking. And so I think that in my experience, I prefer just picking something fast rather than picking something that would necessarily make the most sense in the universe. Because, I mean, hey, the players don't know what the motivation is behind that. Maybe they think that the goblin has a plan, and that's why it's attacking the guy in the big armor or something like that. Or maybe it's just because I panicked, I needed to attack somebody, so I just had to attack the person that attacked it last.
Right, go off of gut instinct and don't even think about it.
Sure.
So it's like,
if I'm running an encounter where, like, this is supposed to be like the conniving, wizard that has, 20 intelligence or whatever and has planned out this whole thing, maybe in that case, I'll like write out some instructions. Like if somebody has attacked it with this, they takes that person out. If this person's they're concentrating on a spell, cast, whatever. I don't know if I would necessarily assign values to those, but I would probably, I guess maybe you could say that. I would probably, if they were meant to be very intelligent, I would put different priorities for different things. But if I'm ever like panicking over it, I'm just the person who attacked me last or the person I attacked last round. Just attack them again.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with the feeling panic part, because there are times where it's like, oh no, I have only attacked the barbarian this combat and we're on round 3.
Yeah.
Do they feel, literally attacked right now, or are they just having a bunch of fun because they're taking all this damage? And
sure.
Yeah, they've been attacked by 5 goblins every round for 3 rounds, but they've taken 10 damage and maybe they don't care.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
As somebody who's played a druid barbarian, basically was there to take as much damage as possible. Like that's fun if that's what your goal is as the player, is to be the tank. When you get hit with like tens or hundreds of damage, over the combat, and everybody else is perfectly fine, it's like you feel super amazing.
Yeah, you did your job.
Yeah, you're like, so like it's, but also as a player, when I feel like I've been attacked so many times in a row, like I do get sort of that feeling of like, oh man, I'm being like DM's got like tunnel vision on me or something like that, but it's, I never really take it personally, but I have like that knee-jerk reaction of like, oh man, me again? Really?
I have had players that have taken it personally, or been in games with people who take it personally, and like I do think it's a matter of it being kind of good to know who's playing your game, right? Because a lot of newer players will maybe pick a barbarian because it seems neat flavor-wise, and won't necessarily recognize that like part of their whole mechanical thing is to be a giant damage sink, right?
Sure, yeah.
So it's always a good thing to like check in with those players if you ever think that they might be taking it personally, or if you just feel like you're attacking them too much.
And really quickly, I want to go back to what you're saying about like if they're being attacked by a wizard, because at the end of my big first homebrew campaign, they were actually fighting a lich, and I went into this battle with a plan. The lich had been like spying on them. He knew about them from reports from his lieutenants and whatnot, and so he went into it with a plan. He was going to use Odaluk's resilient sphere on the barbarian, because that had worked really well when his underlings had used it in the past, and it just nullified the barbarian. And he was going to do this to try and shut down these other characters. And I felt like that was okay, because this was the big epic final battle with the biggest bad guy that the world had at the moment. So I felt like it was okay for him to come in and be as prepared as he could, because it's on the players, because they know that they're going to go up against a lich. They know that he's going to be dangerous. He's going to be powerful. And I had been dropping lots and lots and lots of hints that liches, and this one in particular, were smart and devious and cunning. So they had to make sure they were coming in with a plan of their own of what they were going to do. And it worked out, and it ties in with a death, the death that we'll be talking about towards the end of the episode. But yeah, I think there are times when sometimes you come in with a creature like something that's supposed to be really smart. You want to have a plan almost. You want to have a battle plan, something that they're going to know how to deal with the party, because they're meant to be really smart and scary.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that if you get to like the end of the campaign, like you're up against the final boss, and if the final boss doesn't feel like everything is planned out and is done to, made to be as effective as possible, then it's kind of disappointing.
Yeah, it's
like
just another battle at that point.
Oh, he's just attacking us? Oh,
cool.
Okay, well, I'm all right. I guess this will be an easy fight,
The Lich used an unarmed attack. What?
Right. Well, I mean, they have a paralysis attack on all their natural attacks, if I'm remembering correctly.
Ooh.
So this is one thing that I loved 4th edition for. I loved playing fighters in 4th edition.
Hell yeah.
And defenders in general, just the class role that is all about, aggro. I loved it because a lot of people misunderstood how it worked, and they were like, "Oh, it doesn't make sense." It's how do you force someone to attack you? And 4th edition does it perfectly, because you can attack whoever you want. However, if you attack the fighter, you don't get a penalty. If you don't attack the fighter, you do get a penalty. So it's basically like, whatever happens, if I'm the fighter, whatever happens, I succeed, because either I'm taking the damage and not the cleric, or he's still attacking the cleric, but with a penalty. Mm-hmm. I've given him that penalty, and I've made his attack 10% less likely to hit.
Yeah,
it's great.
And in most cases, they're going to just keep attacking the fight, because they might as well not take the penalty and still be doing damage.
Exactly. And then each defender had their own thing that, on top of the penalty that they would get if they attacked someone other than the defender, something cool would happen. If I'm a fighter, I can hit him and possibly knock him out of melee range, and then he doesn't get to take his attack at all. And I love that. I think that's so cool. If you're the paladin, you deal automatic damage to him. You don't even have to roll to hit. You just he just takes damage because he's attacking someone other than you. I loved that, because it really did force the DM to think about it. Well, do I want to attack the fighter and not get a penalty, or do I want to take a penalty and an attack, or whatever? It's so good. I loved it.
I really miss that stuff from 4th edition, but I think it is also exactly what kind of led to a lot of the complaints about 4th edition from people who actually took the time to play it, and that combat could take forever because it was so tactical, because there was so much of that stuff in there.
Yeah.
And I thought, I still think a lot of that stuff is great, and I miss the Warlord so much.
Warlord was so good.
But I see where that criticism comes in, because now sometimes even only playing a half-hour fight sometimes feels so long, and I remember playing fights in 4th ed that took 5 hours once you got to a certain level, and it was just a lot.
Yeah, that is definitely a downside. The more decisions you're forced to make, the longer it is going to take.
Yeah.
Yeah, so personally, I often just go with the standby of whoever attacked me last. If it is if it's the first round of the encounter and everybody's on equal ground, nobody has a plan or anything like that, I will usually roll. If there's 4 players, I'll roll a d4, and then okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then point at each of them, and then okay, this one's attacking Jeff, and the next time this one's attacking Steve, and so on. If it's the beginning of the fight, and then I kind of just either who hit me last or the person I attacked last is usually where I stay with, unless I definitely notice there's a good reason to attack somebody else.
Yeah.
I will say that this is one of the reasons that I like fights in D&D to have purpose. There's a reason behind a fight breaking out, and I think some of the favorite fights that I've run have been ones where the party is back in a major town, and one of them used to be in a gang, and those gang members aren't happy with the one that left, and they ambush them, and they have planned this. They're going after this one guy to to beat him up, show him a lesson, and tell them that like, hey, if you either don't join back up or leave the city, we're going to come back again. And that kind of takes a lot of the decisions out of my hands almost, because thinking as the characters who are attacking the party means, especially if they're, thinking rational creatures who have a plan, there's a reason why they're doing this. It makes it a lot easier to make those decisions as to who are they hitting, because you have why are they hitting.
Sure.
Somebody said something about a shiny amulet, like the idea of like the party just got a fancy new magic item and they're using it all the time, and it's working very effectively. Because we've talked before about like if you give a party a magical item and it ends up being a little stronger than it should be, like what are some ways to kind of walk that back a bit? Like like maybe make it less effective, or but you don't want to have the it was stolen in the night thing. Like it's like, oh, you guys camp, you made camp and you forgot to put it in a lockbox or something and somebody stole it. Like what? That's
we've said like that's probably the laziest way to deal with a problem like that.
But I feel like we sort of touched on this as well, where you become a target for having this item. So
absolutely.
Like you got the shiny new amulet that makes you immune to certain types of spells or something like that. So it's really powerful. But as the DM, you can then say like, okay, that isn't very powerful, but now anytime something like a goblin or something sees it, they're like, oh my gosh, I want that. And they focus on that character a lot more. So.
Or they're like, I want to destroy that amulet.
Sure.
What you said makes me realize how much of a target adventuring parties have to be in big cities for pickpockets.
Oh, yeah.
Because if a pickpocket is good enough, they just need to make one good theft and they're set for life. They've got more gold than anybody they know would ever make.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I would argue on the other hand of that, that might actually not be true, because pickpockets might be smart enough to try and avoid adventuring parties, because you don't know if that person you just pulled the amulet off of will turn around and smite you for like 10d8 lightning damage when you have 4 hit points.
Right. Yeah. It's like it depends on how desperate the pickpocket is.
Well, it depends on the tone of the world you're running, right? Like a very serious game might have it be like, the pickpockets are afraid of adventurers because adventurers are scary.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I always think that it's a little ridiculous how like the whole pricing of magic items, especially in 3rd edition and in 4th edition, really didn't make any sense in universe. We may in a future episode talk about like making a believable economy in the world. Like it doesn't make sense for the players to just be walking around with a thing on their belt that they could sell to buy an entire kingdom. And so in whenever like money actually comes up in a game that I'm like seriously devoted to, I usually talk with the players beforehand about trying to rework how that works in universe. Like, yes, we're still keeping track of this many gold. However, in universe, that's not physical gold that you have. It's not physically worth that much money. It's just that like you need this much quote unquote money so that you can have this amount of power at this level. But story wise, it's worth, something else. I don't know. I'd have to work it out specific to the situation. But yeah, in a world where someone could just pickpocket you and now they never have to work again.
Yeah.
It's a little goofy on either side.
There'd be a lot more pickpockets.
Well, there would be, or people would learn not to, to just have defenses against that. I don't know. So it makes it's more layers of stuff you gotta rationalize, I think.
Yeah, I think really quick tangent. In the first campaign that I ran, I actually ended up buying a bunch of fantasy metal coins and actually used those at the table. Every player had a little like felt or leather purse that they kept all their coins in, and there was another one for the party gold. And I had some like fake gems as well, and some quote unquote trade bars that were worth like 100 or 1,000, so that they could have larger denominations. And I think it was one of the things that my players liked the most was when they killed something that actually had some money on them and I handed out coins. They're like, yes, precious. But it also made it really fun because they left all of that at my place when they went home. And, I think there was one time where they had gone to sleep in an inn in a big city, and Then we ended the session, and then they all went home, and they got pickpocketed. But I didn't have to tell them, oh, remove 20 gold from all of your purses. I just went and took 20 gold from all of their purses.
I mean, that's really cool. If you want to take the time to make that work, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
We're like, wait a minute.
Any kind of physical representation of something that the players can hold in their hands, I'm on board. I love it.
Hell yeah.
All right, our next question comes from Colton S. on email, and they ask, how do you feel about the weapon list on 5th edition D&D? Do you think the weapons should be more distinct, or that there should be more of them?
Yeah. So yeah, in 5th edition, they kind of like pared down how many weapons there were compared to earlier editions. I also constantly hear arguments online of people saying like, "Oh, you got to bring back the Bec de Corbin, man. There's got to be more of these more of these very like slightly distinct weapons." Yeah. What are you guys' opinion on all the weapons out there?
I've only played 5th edition, but I agree that the list of weapons, I think for me, it's not so much the list of weapons, it's the fact that in the core rules, there's no way for players to make them really their own.
Yeah.
And so I went searching online, and I found a couple of different resources. There's a couple, I think there's 2 or 3 really good PDFs floating around Reddit somewhere. And one of them had some really good options on customizing via taking a sword and making it serrated so that it, inflicts a wound that continues to do a little bit of damage over time via like a bleeding effect. Or making a sword a little bit sharper so that like using almost like Wolverine's adamantium claws so that it's a little bit easier to slice through armor and stuff like that. And as well, I also found some resources for kind of Monster Hunter style creating weapons and armor from the big creatures that you kill. Like
I'm listening.
I saw Jeff perk up when he said that.
In my first campaign, they defeated a small herd of bullets, and one of the characters was like, I want to take their giant skull head things and make some armor out of that. And I'm like, sure. In the beginner box campaign that I ran, I let one of them, there's a young green dragon in like a town that's been abandoned, and they managed to kill the dragon, and one of them was like, I want to try and skin this young green dragon and try and do something with it. And I ended up letting them turn it into a shield that helped them resist poison damage. And I think there's plenty of other things. I'm not remembering everything that's in these PDFs, but I don't think there needs to be more weapons. I think there needs to be more options on how players can make those weapons their own, because if 3 players have a greatsword, they're all imagining a different greatsword. So why not let them customize those weapons so that mechanically they feel more like their own greatsword?
Yeah, I like that. One of the more interesting things I've found in like some of the optional races, not the core races, but like lizard folk can make weapons out of like bones and stuff.
Okay.
Like it's just one of the racial features is they can take, I think, a short rest and make like it's limited to like javelins, daggers, and like maybe clubs or something. I'm not sure. It's a very short list, but it's like you can use the bones and other pieces of things you've killed. Like it's like, I think it's specifically like beasts and constructs and a couple other types or something like that. But like, so I was playing a lizard folk character that used javelins, and like I had a collection of javelins from different things, and the DM that I was playing with, like, would sometimes, like, if it was a particular thing that I made it out of, like, would sometimes give it like, oh, this one actually, like, this one has this weird property that it'll only ever do average damage. Like you don't have to roll for damage for this one. It just does this damage.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that's interesting, because it's not like overpowered in any way. It just kind of changed it just sort of changed how the weapon worked a little bit. I could always take the average damage if I used that javelin instead of this other javelin, which I think they gave it like an extra 1+1 to attack or something like that.
Sure.
I really like that idea, because you can also, as a GM, do other things like, hey, did they kill some mystical creature like an adult blue dragon? Okay, maybe those javelins now do an extra D4 lightning damage. And but they lose that property after, like, they've only got so many charges or something.
Sure.
Or, if they use the teeth of the dragon or the claws or something to make a sword, like one of those kind of Mayan style swords that just has all these it's like a piece of wood with sharp things sticking out of it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Shark teeth usually.
Yeah, like you can, like, maybe it functions like a long sword, but maybe it has a larger critical range. So instead of just on a 20, it's 18 to 20.
So I'm of two minds about the equipment list in 5e. I don't mind that the weapons list is the size it is. My complaint is the armor list.
Okay.
So, and this actually comes back to kind of the Monster Hunter style thing. But 4th Ed had a bunch of advanced armors that were usually made from some sort of magical creature. The immediate one that springs to mind is the Displacer Beast leather armor. Which,
that's pretty awesome.
And like, for the most part, all they did was increase your AC. They didn't necessarily have to do anything special additionally. But I also understand that it comes to the bounded accuracy that is inbuilt into 5th edition that wasn't present in previous editions to the same degree.
Sure.
But I also really miss exotic weapons.
Yeah.
And like, with the feat system they have in 5e, you could easily like be like, yeah, feat exotic weapon, great bow. You can now use this weapon. It does this sort of damage, and it has a pushback effect, or, something. You could easily build something for that. I also have one other niggly little kind of complaint that is more nitpick than anything else. Is in one of the recent books, they introduced the, oh god, what are they called? The Shatter Kai, and their iconic weapon, which is like a chain whip.
Oh, yeah.
Or a spiked chain.
Yeah.
They did not include mechanics for it for players to use, which, like, my thinking would be the first time somebody with an AC or strength bonus who has martial weapon training, which means they can use every weapon, kills one, they're going to want that weapon. Like,
oh, it broke.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just seems like a weird little just tiny oversight in that book, but it was like, because I was leafing through it because I wanted to base a weapon off of it, and then it wasn't there, so I would have had to hack it out of the existing mechanics for the monster. And the way weapons work with monsters, they have different damage outputs than they would if a player had that weapon.
Right. They've got damage outputs dependent on the monster's intended role in the combat, not if a player gets their hands on that weapon.
Right, because it'd be like a bugbear does 2d8 with a club or something.
Yeah.
But the clubs themselves do 1d8, or it's like a great club. It's like, well, I can't loot this great club off this bugbear and it be a 2d8 great club. It's like, no, because that's not.
Yeah.
The stat block of a monster does not equal its equipment.
Right. In 3rd edition, they did. Like there was a direct correlation between the stat blocks of an NPC or monster and the player, for better and for worse. So I guess I am also of two minds of the of the equipment list. Now, I like how they simplified the list. However, I think that the list, I feel very strongly the list has had very little work put into it.
Yes.
When Colton first submitted this question, I kind of changed the question, I would say pretty significantly. I think I kind of maintained the spirit of the question, but he started off by asking, what's the difference between a halberd and a glaive? Because in the book, there is none. They both deal the same amount of damage, the same type of damage, they weigh the same, and they cost the same, yet they are two different entries on the list. Now, before noticing that, my argument for why did they have to shorten the list is, oh, well, they took all the weapons that would fulfill the same role, and you can just flavor one to be the other. But then why did they leave halberd and glaive as two distinct weapons?
Right.
In 3rd edition, they were different in that a halberd didn't have reach. Now, whether that makes sense or not, that's a different question. But a halberd didn't have reach, a glaive did have reach. That was the difference between those two weapons. 3rd edition, I don't know if it's worth going over it, but I did bring up the list of weapons in 3rd edition and the list of weapons that we have now in 5th edition. There are definitely some missing items on there. A lot of the, like, monk weapons, for example, they got rid of monk weapons entirely and instead said, if you're a monk, these are the weapons you're proficient with. If you wanted to, you can reflavor one of them as being something else. Like, we didn't need a comma, which is a 1d6 one-handed slashing weapon, when you're already proficient in a short sword. You can just say it's the same stats.
Yeah,
you can say, it's a comma instead of short sword. Now, there are people there are medieval historian / weapon enthusiasts who will argue for hours about, no, a short sword is this, a gladius is this, and then, the whatever is this other thing. And they'll look at these two weapons that in D&D and any edition would have the same stats, and they'll say, no, because this one is like 2 inches longer, or this one was like curved slightly so it worked better if you're in your offhand or whatever.
Right, this was more of a bashing weapon than a cutting weapon.
Sure.
So technically it's both bludgeoning and slashing.
Sure. I would say the end result with 3rd edition, because like we've been saying, 3rd edition had a lot of different weapons. There were a lot of books that had like, oh, here's this. You can have a slight modification to your weapon. I think, Sean, you were saying that there's like a book that has like, you can make your weapon serrated. There was sort of a running gag in our campaign that serrated and laminated were two things that you wanted on every weapon. Those were, in 3rd edition, in some third-party splat book, you could modify your weapon to be masterwork, serrated, and laminated. All three of them gave a different benefit, and there was no reason you couldn't have all three. But because each one gave such a significant benefit, when you got to high levels and you had more money than you knew what to do with, it basically became, okay, every one of my weapons is masterwork, serrated, and laminated. And so every weapon was so ridiculous. It had a times 3 critical. It got a critical on a 15 to 20. And I feel like with tons and tons of weapons, you're going to get there's going to be the players that are like, oh man, I heard about this weapon in history class. I love it. And that's all they're going to use it for. But then you get the other players that are going to say, which of these has the maximum damage output? Mm-hmm. Well, this one has a times 3 critical, so I'm going to use that one. Yes, the base damage is lower, but I have a high strength score. I'm going to use a two-handed, and so on and so on. The spiked chain is such a cool weapon thematically. I love the spiked chain. However, it was like the most broken weapon ever. And everybody either used a spiked chain, or there'd be a third-party book that came out that it was some other weapon on the end of a spiked chain, and that's how they made it unique.
Yeah.
I loved the spiked chain. I thought it was so cool, but I understand why they took it out, because how do you give it stats to make it distinct without just making it better?
You require a feat to use it.
Well, I suppose
like exotic weapons would be my answer, right? But
yeah, but then like there's going to be someone who says, okay, well I'm statting out a 15th level character. I've got 6 feats or whatever. Sure, I'll spend one of them to double my damage output or whatever.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that it would double, but
there's always or everybody's going to play a human no matter what, so you can get a bonus feat, so they can get that exotic weapon.
It's a tough line. I imagine it was a tough line to walk when they were redoing the weapons list, because they do want to simplify the game. D&D has a lot of rules. We've said before, like I've pointed out, like a lot of people get turned off by D&D because it's got so many charts and so many rules and so many references and so on. I can understand them wanting to pare it down, but some of the uniqueness does get lost. I liked how there were like 5 or 6 different pole arms in 3rd edition. One was good at disarming, one was good at tripping, one was good at some other thing. And I understand they took those out to simplify, because disarming isn't really a thing anymore. They kind of simplified that too. And It sucks. It would be cool if there was some more flavor, but I understand why they did it. I don't necessarily think there needs to be more weapons, but I think that there should be like a little sidebar that says, if you used this weapon in the previous edition, use this weapon and describe it as whatever. Like, I would love if there was an analog for the spike chain, even though, like, the spike chain, a lot of people used it because it was mechanically better.
Yeah.
It had reach, but you could also attack people close to you and so on. So I don't know. I don't think the list needs to be longer than it is. I think it could be. You could get rid of either the halberd or the glaive, one of the two.
I do think there is a section in the weapons section that says that, like, a longsword can also be a katana or this or that or the other thing. Like, I think that is actually mentioned, but it would be better if it was like a box text near the section as opposed to just in among the rules kind of sprinkled about.
Yeah.
Sure.
And what I was talking about earlier with going onto Reddit and finding people's homebrew content for customizing weapons, like, the reason I did that is because I had 2 players in my table that wanted to customize their weapons. Everybody else was fine. Like, the ranger was fine just having her bow and me throwing her some cool arrows now and then. And the Eric Okra Arcane Knight was fine with just a sword because she got to do fun magic stuff. But having some options for the players that do want to be able to customize their stuff, and like what you're saying with, like, there used to be like a polearm that let you disarm and one that was good at tripping. I think those are the kinds of things that make sense for a player to figure. Like, I guess because I've never played a campaign where players started at level 15. Like, every campaign that I've done has been you start at level 1 or at level 3. And so the players have a couple of levels to really figure out, as they're leveling this character up, as we're playing, like, what kind of fighter am I playing exactly? And then once they figured that out, then I'll open up some options if they want them for, okay, my fighter really wants to be able to control the battlefield, so he wants to be able to trip people because that lets him control what's going on a little bit more. What are some options that I, as the DM, can give to them for either customizing their weapons or finding new weapons that let them do that?
Sure. I hope it didn't sound like I was disparaging wanting to, make your weapons unique. Like, in a group, go ahead, do whatever. Especially if you're the dungeon master, if you want to give your players something that is unique, even if it is more powerful, go for it. It's your game. It's just printing it in a book is when you open up that can of worms, because there are a lot of people that they don't have a dedicated game, so they spend all their time theory crafting and posting on, their character builds and whatnot on the internet. And I think that some of the people, some degree of the work that went into each new edition is taking that into account more and more. And so it's like, well, we could put this in the book because some people will really like it, but if we do that, some other people will really abuse this.
Yeah.
Oh, for
and
sure.
So it's like I said, it's a tough line to walk.
Yeah, and I think that's I think the biggest argument for why they have bounded accuracy now is they want to make sure that you don't have to have spent a week thinking about your character, theory crafting, min-maxing to have an enjoyable time at the table, because otherwise you just get trounced. It means that, new players who have never played before can come in and be like, oh, can I have a katana? Yeah, here, longsword, but just in your mind, it's a katana. And the players that really, really want to spend a bunch of time min-maxing, if their GM will allow it, then they can go off and find or homebrew with their GM some way to make their weapons more powerful and do that min-maxing if they really, 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 really want to.
Sure.
I also think that, and I'll make this quick, I guess. I also think that part of the weapons thing for fighters especially, which are usually going to be the class with the most vanilla fighting style, who would probably care the most about weapons doing special things, the sub-builds for fighters, the subclasses are what covers that. And I think there's something to be said about, like, not including that additional stuff in book equipment because, well, your class does that, and that's part of your class's whole thing. And they're, fighters, especially since a lot of them are very straightforward, for some people, I think it feels like they lose something when the bard can also now, use this weapon to disarm and basically just non-magically gain an ability that you have that is something that makes your character mechanically different.
Unique.
Yeah. If I were to put in some of these old weapons that, kind of got lost in 5th edition, I would be tempted to make it so that they have the same stats as another weapon. However, if you are a battle master fighter, you get a +1 when you spend a superiority die in order to do a specific maneuver. I could put in a disarm that would give you a +1 to trip your opponent, because that's what a disarm did. And anybody else, it just has the same stats as a glaive because they don't have the skills necessary to make use of that special ability. The only person that would is someone who has focused on, fighting with that type of weapon, like a battle master fighter.
Sure.
I really like that idea because it kind of ties in with some of the magical items that are in the DM's guide. Like there's the battle wand for sorcerers that gives them more power when they cast spells. There's wands and staffs for all the wizards and magic people.
Yeah.
And the magical weapons are kind of a little bit more just like, it's a sword, but it's also lightsaber, or it's
Right.
a sword, but it's also like, it has magical properties that let it do fantastical things, but there aren't really those lower level, like, yeah, it's a sword, but it also, or it's a polearm, but it also lets you trip people now if you're playing a fighter. Like, I
Sure.
don't feel like there are many of those magical items that, are kind of aimed at the fighters and melee people.
I feel like the lack of magical weapons is a whole other conversation.
Sure. Maybe a discussion for a future episode. Just one more thing that I want to say about how it gets a little funky when you are running a game that does have all of these third-party books with all these other weapons in it. When you've got the one player in the group that they're like, I'm using an elven twin blade, which is this weapon from this other book that's basically just a long sword but with a better critical threat range. And then, they've been adventuring for a couple sessions. They're using this rare weapon nobody else has ever heard of. Oh, this orc is also using a +1 elven thin blade so that when you kill it, you can get a better version of it. And it's always like, why does that orc have a +1 elven twin blade?
Right, yeah.
But
when they have this
I
very
guess-
unique weapon, how do they go about getting a new one? Or,
Right. I always feel like it's a little weird when you've got someone with a unique weapon and you want to enhance that unique weapon, and the easiest way to do it is to just give them another weapon.
Well, that's tangent on tangent on tangent. That's actually something with the campaign that I'm running. Well, it's on hold right now. But what I did is there's 3 players, a druid, a bard, and a sorcerer. And really early on, first level, they all found a magic item that I had crafted for them. But at level 1, they haven't, these are all old weapons that have lost their power. And so if over the campaign they put work into upgrading these weapons, these things that are right now, they give them a little bit of an advantage. It empowers their spells maybe a little bit. But if they put the work in and they go looking for the magical bits and bobs and things they need to improve them, then over time they'll turn into the kind of weapons that at level 10 or 15 are like, oh my god, this is so amazing.
All right, cool. Do you guys have anything else to say about this question?
No, I don't think so.
Just put more things on the end of spike chains.
For a long time that was sort of the joke. If you want to make a broken weapon, just put it on the end of a spike chain.
It's making up an exotic weapon was as easy as
It's as easy as putting it on the end of a chain.
Is that where the sword chucks joke came from?
Yes.
Okay.
It probably, yeah. Well, I mean, it specifically that came from 8-Bit Theater was a webcomic around at the time. But I imagine it was probably inspired by just putting a weapon on the end of a chain. All right. Well, that'll do it for our regular questions. We do still have our social media discussion questions, so we'll try to blaze through this. So the previous question that we did was, what was your first session like? We didn't get a ton of responses to this one. We got a good handful, but I was more than I was expecting actually, but not as many as we usually get. But Jeff, do you remember what your answer was?
Yeah, I vaguely remember sitting in my parents' living room on the floor. Steve was showing me, like, he had got the box set for, I think, second edition.
Mm-hmm.
And he was playing me through, like, a dungeon. I'm pretty sure there was bugbears and maybe an ooze of some sort. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But it's a very long time ago, but I do remember fighting some bugbears.
Cool. Sounds good. Sean and Jesse, do you guys recall what your first session was like?
My first session was I had wandered into my friend's place while they were just setting up a one-shot. So I made a half-elf with a scythe based partially on Magus from Chrono Trigger, because that's what I was playing a lot of the time. And I didn't understand how anything worked, and I confused a gnome and a goblin, much to everyone's delight and annoyance. And then I had to leave partway through because my parents showed up and they were like, "We got to drive you home."
Yeah.
My first session was sitting behind the GM screen doing the 5th edition beginner's box and feeling super anxious and nervous before realizing about halfway through that I knew just about as much as my players did, and they didn't really care because they were having fun, and things got much better.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, good to hear it. I guess my first session was actually a role-playing game that my brother made up with some of his friends, and I remember it was basically just D&D, but with slightly different rules. And I remember we fought a dragon at the end, and I was so blown away by like the freedom that you had to do stuff. My brother was playing he was playing like a geomancer or something, and whatever this system was, and he caused the earth to like rise up and grab onto the dragon's tail so the dragon couldn't make a tail attack anymore. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's a thing? But I only played that game that one time, and then I didn't actually play. I played D&D a couple years later, and that didn't go much better, I guess. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Definitely an important part of my life. So we got a couple answers over on Facebook. Brandon B says, "I was 8. Me and a buddy spent a day learning advanced math, figuring out THACO."
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Pulling out the graphing calculator.
Exactly. Ryan P says, "Absolutely terrifying. I have pretty bad social anxiety and only knew one person at the table. In all honesty, I thought about calling in and saying I couldn't make it, but I'm glad I didn't because D&D has really helped me be more social." That's really cool. There you go. We got one on Reddit. FB Ogre 666 says, "So I can't remember my first session specifically, but I can remember the campaign it was a part of. I played an Elven Ranger in 3.5 that prestige classed in the Order of the Bow Initiate. However, the people I played with weren't great at explaining the rules of the game to me. I had an abysmal attack bonus because I didn't understand how attack bonuses stacked. But whenever I managed to hit something, I would do a truckload of damage. It was overall a fun, if not frustrating, experience." Was that the prestige class that let you get attacks of opportunity on anyone within bow range?
I don't know. I can't remember.
I think it might have been.
Gods, I hope so.
Yeah.
That sounds terrible and amazing.
If that's not it, there were two classes that were like the most broken bow classes that a lot of people would take both of them, and that was Order of the Bow Initiate was one of them. It might have been a different one that was the attack of opportunity one. Anyway, one on Twitter, Stephen M says, "An hour of the players arguing over whether to go left or right until I realized it was my job as DM to get things moving, and I sent a pack of wolves to attack the party. This was followed by an hour of deciding how to deal with all these wolves."
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, pretty good. Got a few on Discord. I won't read all of them, but E. Thompson03 says, "Imagine a college me. Well, you guys don't know me very well, so imagine a chunky, shy kid in his freshman year of college. Late night, excitement ebbing to play the game my parents were concerned about me playing as a kid. Having the time of my life making a gnome paladin that couldn't possibly survive the rigors of paladin's life. Man, that was a simpler time in life. So in short, it was one of my favorite moments of college." There you go.
Nice.
The Beverage Tea says, "I nearly peed my pants because I was so nervous."
Sure.
Okay, end of story. Floofy Shoob says, "First time I ever played was Gamma World, and I can remember trying to escape from a trap-filled maze. Second time I ever played, I was a low-level cleric wandering the wildlands around Specularum and died almost immediately."
I should play Gamma World again.
I've actually never played it. I've heard good things about it.
I have the box that has the 4E edition in it.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's the only thing I've ever heard of was the 4E version.
I think it was like a splat book from 3.5 or 3rd,
Yeah.
second ed or something like that.
Stiltskin Kupo 84 says, I covered this when I guested. What I left out was that our creative writing group had one girl who kept showing up in these busty fantasy-esque outfits. There was another mousy, nerdy girl who loved The Simpsons, but because the rest of us were hormone-filled college guys, guess where everyone's attention was fixed.
Uh-oh.
So it became sort of an unspoken metagame for us all to play our characters in a way that impressed the female player sitting with us. Add a dash of conflict... Ding. And boom, it was really fated to fail.
Oh, gosh.
So, sorry to everyone involved, I guess. from me to everybody involved in Stiltskin Kupo 84 story. GG Sonic says, very awkward but pretty fun. I still have no idea how I convinced my friend to play with me, let alone stay to this day. And Thoin Frostax says, I was 15 or so. My buddy DM'd a solo adventure. That night, I created Thoin Frostax, first of his name, heir to the frozen throne in the Northern Mountain. I have used that name as my gamer tag ever since. I don't remember the adventure, but I was hooked from that moment on. So there you go. Some cool memories from the listeners. So the next question we're going to be doing is, have you ever felt like you were playing RPGs, quote unquote, too much? And the answer may be no.
Yeah,
but
my answer is no, of course not. I don't play nearly enough.
Yeah.
As much as we talk at length about, tabletop games every week.
Sure.
And we've only recently started playing, so
yeah.
More RPGs.
I mean, we used to play quite a bit
We
back
did used
in
to
the
play
day.
a lot, yeah.
Yeah. What about you guys?
No. There was one point where I was playing 2 weekly games, and just because I had different priorities then, I felt like maybe I should stop. But at this point, no, I wish I was playing more. It's just a matter of not having the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I wish I was playing more.
Okay.
Yeah.
I figured most people will probably say no, but maybe somebody out there. There was one time where it was when we were just out of high school. I think I was running one game of D&D, I was playing another game of D&D, and I was playing in a Mutants and Masterminds game all in a given week. So every week I had 3 games going on. It only persisted for about a month, and then one of them fell apart, and then probably another one fell apart, and then probably the third one fell apart too. But we had a revolving door of games we were trying to get going. So it solved itself, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can't picture it being like, oh God, my RPG addiction has become such a problem. It's ruining my life. It's more just like,
I'm having too much fun with my friends. Oh no!
Right.
dear God. Yeah.
Okay.
It's more just like it usually gets to I don't have enough time to before it gets to I'm doing this too much.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. Okay. All right. Well, that'll do it for our questions for this week. But before we close out, we do still have one more segment. So I think we should let's wind down a little bit. Let's take a deep breath. Let's remember those who have come before us, those who have given their lives that we may have a better world to live in, as we toss another log onto the funeral pyre. All right, so one of you had a funeral pyre story for today, is that correct?
That is correct. This is the story of how Magnus died. We didn't realize at the time when the player named his character that it was the same name as somebody from the Adventure Zone.
Yes.
So he wasn't copying, I will say that.
Okay.
Magnus was a half-orc barbarian, the tankiest tank. And
that ever tanked.
Pretty much. And his story was that his rage, his barbarian rage, had come upon him suddenly when he was younger. And he had come out of a rage blackout to find that he had killed his family. And he was exiled from his tribe in the setting. Orcs and half-orcs were kind of a little bit like Vikings. They were raiding marauders, but they were usually very close-knit clans. And so for him to be exiled was a big deal. And he had joined a mercenary guild to try and find some way to atone for what he had done. And what ended up happening was he found out that late, like about halfway through the campaign, that no matter what he did, it would be very unlikely that he would ever be accepted back into his clan. This was told to him by a shaman who came to tell him that there was something very important he had to go do to save the world. So it was kind of a, yay, I have something to, oh, this isn't going to help me get back. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
And this big thing that he had to do was actually go and help his the party go and deal with the Lich, which was the big, bad, evil guy at the end of the campaign. And the way that this played out was actually that the player was actually getting tired of playing a tanky barbarian. He was getting tired of, in a party of 5, he was the one that took the most damage, but it was still really boring because he had like he had almost 200 hit points at a time when the rest of the party had like 80. And so he was just getting bored. He wanted to play something else, but he wanted to give Magnus an epic send-off. So when they went up against the Lich, who at the time I was actually planning to continue the campaign, but then I got burnt out, so I had to cut it off. But what I planned was when they went into the Lich's stronghold, they snuck in and snuck past all the guards and everything and got to his central I don't know what you call it, the central part of his keep, and they snuck in and they thought they had done a really good job, but turns out that the Lich knew that they were coming, and there was a snafu, and they fell through the floor, which turned out to be a ceiling of a big chamber, and the Lich thought that he was going to start off this combat by using power word kill to take out the ranger, I think, who was the person that the barbarian was closest to in the game. And this is when I gave the signal to the barbarian that this is the moment. And he jumped in front of the spell, which I had described as this like black cloud of energy that coalesced into a hand and then began to shoot towards the ranger. And he jumped in front of it and he died. And then what happened is one of the gods of the setting came down and froze time and told them that this was a really important moment in history. This was like a pivot point, kind of like a fixed point in time if you're a fan of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And this was a really important moment, and that he couldn't do much, but he would try to tilt the scales a little bit in their favor. And so what he did was he said, "You're dead. I can't change that, but I can give you a little bit more life." And so he basically brought him back and supercharged him, but after this there would be no way to bring this barbarian back. He would be dead. His soul would be gone. And as part of that, what happened was that, like, to empower him, he basically, this god kind of like reforged the link that the barbarian had broken by killing his family, by reconnecting him with his ancestors. And so he got really powerful. He was able to, like, I gave him some extra abilities that were kind of emblematic of how he had been playing the game. He was always the one that jumped out in front to protect everybody else. So he was able to use his reaction to like half the damage from, because they were going up against 4 iron golems and the Lich all at the same time, and they were under leveled. But I had planned this out so that that the barbarian being given this extra power would help level the playing field. And because there'd been kind of an element of lost family and found family throughout this campaign, like one of the characters was searching for, the Eric Okra was searching for the gnome who had raised her and taught her magic, and one of the other players was trying to prove to his family that he was worthy of, you know, taking up the mantle of the family, because they were this large family of merchants and power brokers and all this kind of stuff. And so, like, as part of the barbarian getting connected to his family, all the rest of them, like, I narrated this scene of, you know, they look behind them and they can see their family, like Avatar style, you know, reaching out behind them, and all of them reaching forward to empower them. So I empowered all of the players for this epic final battle, and they all got to, when the Eric Okra or the cleric cast a spell, it was full damage. No need to roll dice. You're just doing full damage because you have a lot of damage to do to this lich and these iron golems, and they managed to take out the iron golems and the lich, and the lich actually, through his machinations, he had been planning on dying, and basically took over the guardian of like a place where magic came into the world, and he took over this like ancient sea dragon. But because they were still empowered, they were able to like slowly make their way through. A different character almost died, and it was this whole thing. And afterwards, the player who played the barbarian, he told me after, he's like, that was way more than I could have ever hoped for. I'm so glad that you were able to put that together. And I was just so happy that he was happy with it.
Well, cool. Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you did a great job with that.
Thanks.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess let's raise a glass in memory of Magnus, who rushed in.
Clink.
It's an Adventure Zone
Right.
reference. Okay, well, that'll do it for this episode. So let me once again thank Jesse and Sean from DMs of Vancouver. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Would you like to tell our listeners once more where they can reach you, where they can find your podcast? If there's anything else you're working on, go ahead and plug that.
DMs of Vancouver and many other shows that are part of the Cave Goblin Network. You can find that at cavegoblins.com. We've got a Patreon, patreon.com/cavegoblins, where you can find all of those shows, as well as Revolver, which is a special rotating mini-series that various hosts on the network do, where you can hear right now a show called Second Bananas. And if you go back into the archives, you can hear Jesse doing Tabletop Tales, where I retell the story that I just told a little bit better, I think.
You had more time to do it.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, cool. Well, thanks again. And for everybody else, to submit questions for us to discuss, items for the Dragon's Hoard, or stories for the Funeral Pyre, please email us at interpartyconflict@gmail.com. If you want to see show notes, links to media mentioned on the show, or a running list of questions and or magic items, you can go to our website, interpartyconflict.com. You can find us on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Reddit. We've got our Discord at bit.ly/interpartydiscord. We have a Twitter account at InPartyConflict. We've got weekly social media questions that you can answer, and if you answer, your answers might end up on the show. Check us out on the podcast app of your choice. We're on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, all those. Leave us a review, leave us a rating, subscribe, or just tell a friend. If you'd like to support the show and help us keep making it, you can check us out at patreon.com/interpartyconflict. We've got some different rewards on there, so see what appeals to you and, see if you want to help out the show. Jeff, tell us about FriendQuest.
FriendQuest is a YouTube channel where we play video games.
Yes. Speaking of video games, I've got my little side podcast, the Arcade Memories Podcast. If you want to submit a story for that, you can submit it to arcadememoriespodcast@gmail.com. Also, head over to bit.ly/interpartyconflict to take a short survey about our show. Let us know what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show. And if you take it, you'll get 2 free printable board games courtesy of Mary and Tom over at hollandspiel.com. And our music is made by Boxcat Games from Nameless the Hacker's RPG. So, Jeff, until next time.
Gabe, I thought of a way to make this podcast a little bit more exotic.
What's that?
Put it on the end of a spiked chain.